recording this to the cloud. As I said just before coming on the air, delete busy, nice, and good. None of them are too busy, and don't be too nice, and don't say everything's good. It's fantabulous. It's splendid. It's wonderful. Don't just say, it's good. She's so nice. Jill's so nice. But I'm too busy to talk to her today. No. You know, you're time bound, your plate is full, you're engaged in the moment. And tonight we're going to be engaged in the moment with Lydia Cao. She's coming to us all the way, I think, from Harvard in Boston, still in Boston. She took a new job in Toronto. I don't even know if she's moved from east to west, but that's her life, apparently, the last few years, is moving from west to east and east to west, from China over to the UK at Oxford. These are really smart people in Oxford. I had a chance to speak there twice. It's Oxford, not Cambridge, right?
It's Cambridge, not Oxford.
Oh, it's Cambridge. I spoke there once, but it's still just as nice. Actually, you know, I have no preference between the two. If I had to select to go somewhere just to visit, I'd go to Oxford. If I had to go with friends to try and impress them, I'd go to Cambridge. So, you know, that's the way it is. And from Cambridge, she goes to Harvard. So, you know, the top university in UK, top university in USA, and then she's in University of Toronto working at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, called OISE, the top university in Ontario, if not the whole Canadian provinces. And so Lydia has a way of finding herself to the top places. And that's why she's in this class tonight, because she likes visiting the top places. This is the top class, isn't it? You know, this is the top university in Indiana, anyhow, right here in Bloomington. Probably the best university for instructional technology in the USA. So she likes to come visit these best places. And she wrote a couple of best articles. It's in your best syllabus. She's written an article, Navigating the World of Generative AI, Suggestions for Educators, with Chris Deedy of Harvard, who was a guest previously in this class. We have to let Christy Young in here. She's in the waiting room. So she's going to talk about that for about 10 minutes. And she's also going to talk about her Earth X design for sustainable world, moving from human-centered to Earth-centered design with Tina Grotzer, if I'm pronouncing that right. And both of these papers are available from Harvard. They have something called the Next Level Lab. So, you know, Lydia's worked in her dissertation with Pakistani teachers, trying to get them professional development to foster more interactive dialogue in their science education classrooms. She's worked at Harvard in thinking about the design, sustainability of different generative AI technology in XR worlds. And she's now working in OISE, or about to, and helping them build knowledge for public good. See, OISE has developed something for a long time called the Knowledge Forum. And before that, it was called Computer Supported Intentional Learning Environments, or the CECIL project. CECIL was decades ago, back when I was dissertating. And it was my dissertation is based on the work that she's now studying and working on in OISE. The world kind of comes around. It's just funny how that happens. And so, you know, I built tools within a word processing language for students to interact and reflect on their writing based on Marlene Scardamelia's research, who is your advisor now, or your boss, I guess, now after all these years. Funny how that works. So they did such a good job with the CECIL project that Apple Computer bought the project and gave them a bunch of money. And then they built the Knowledge Forum where kids could contribute knowledge and links and ideas. And when Al Gore won the presidential election and beat George Bush and then lost to him, that day I was in Toronto and I was absentee balloting voting that day. And it was in 2000 in November, right? I guess about this time. And I told everyone at the conference it would come down to Florida, which it did. I didn't realize how bad the instructional design caused Al Gore to lose. You know, IST people caused him to lose because they didn't design a ballot that people was functional in Florida. Anyways, a long story. I shouldn't do politics here. But the thing is, Marlene Scardamelia, your boss, and her husband, Carl Bereiter, came to the stage to give a keynote talk. This has literally happened. They stood up there, and I was in the back row, if I remember right, and they invited others up to the stage with them. And they were 7- and 8-year-old kids who delivered their keynote talk, okay? They were building knowledge in this knowledge forum tool and sharing. They were doing, you could juxtapose your paper compared to another paper and have a peer database that you would call papers. Today we would call that cheating, but they were teaching these 7th and 8th grade, 7 and 8-year-old kids, 2nd grade and 3rd grade, 4th grade, not how to cheat, but how to share and how to index the comments based on deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, inferencing, labeling their thinking skills. And so, trying to foster high-level thinking, what's called HOTS, higher order thinking skills, not LOTS, lower order thinking skills. And so they built this Cecil project. Now, at that point, it was called the Knowledge Forum. And you can look this up, Bo. If you get the Knowledge Forum from OISE, you can put the link in there for us and look up Marlene Scardamelia and get her link up there too. So I'm prefacing all this saying, yeah, that Oxford stuff, okay, that Harvard stuff, but it's the Toronto stuff that's going to make your life, because that's where important stuff is happening. All the cool stuff has been happening in Toronto, and also a lot of cool people live in Toronto. It's one of the most diverse cities in the world, if not the most diverse city in the world. If you haven't been to Toronto, you need to go to Toronto. It's a lovely place. Now, question number 1, Lydia, are you in Toronto? Are you in Harvard? Or are you in Oxford right now? Where are you?
I'm in Toronto at the moment.
Did you find a place to live, or are you in the streets homeless?
That's a good question. I'm staying with a friend. Otherwise, I'd probably end up on the street.
Funny how that works too. What made you interested in generative AI?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the first time anyone interacted with ChatGPT was a little overwhelmed with how it can generate seemingly very reasonable response, and think how this is going to change everything we do. And that really intrigued me, and I want to delve a little bit deeper. And I know there's lots of concerns in the education space, and I was an educator myself, so putting myself in educator's shoes, I want to do some work surrounding this to support educators to navigate this terrain.
You were an educator doing what? In China, you were an educator, or in Oxford?
I was teaching math and science in Canada before my PhD.
Okay. What city?
Calgary.
That's a good city too. Lovely city. So what is regenerative hope?
Regenerative hope. So that's another good question. That's another research project I'm currently doing, which I'm not going to present tonight, but hopefully once we've done the research, I can come back maybe one day to present it. So it's basically after reviewing literature on different kinds of hope that's out there, and then also listening to lots of discourse surrounding climate change, how hope is always mentioned, and everyone's saying we need hope, but what kind of hope? And I thought there was a lack of critical engagement with the concept of hope and what are we really talking about when we say we need hope. Do experts give us hope, or do we create hope? So and that led me to think about kind of conceptualize the concept of regenerative hope as having 5 kind of conceptual and effective shifts. So I'm just going to mention 2 of them. So for example, hope in the literature is often seen as a reaction to a difficulty or a challenge that you cannot find it difficult to cope with. So to shift from a reactive kind of conceptualization of hope, we want to see hope as something proactive. So something that you actively seek for in your day-to-day life in a difficult situation. Another conceptual shift is shifting from an individual conception of hope to a more collective sense, meaning that hope, it's most of the literature focus on how hope help individuals to cope with the difficulties, but less on how collectively we can create hope. And that will, I guess I was mention one more, that also led to the conception of shifting away from being a passive recipient hope, such as in the climate change context, is always, oh, as a scientist, as expert, we need to give the public hope, to a more agentive conception, meaning that we are the public, we are actually creators of hope for ourselves and for each other and for the world. So the 5 conceptual change that's happening. I can also share the paper in chat. Is also published on the Next Level Lab website. And if you're interested, or you think you will be interested in participating in the study to be interviewed, please feel free to contact and reach out.
So tonight we have hope. We have Lydia providing, this is a class of hope tonight, and Bo went to his bookshelf. I saw him go to his bookshelf. He's probably got Obama's Hope and Change book or something. What do you have, Hope books? What is that, Bo? You're muted.
There we go. I tried to click off. When I saw, I was doing a little bit of looking up on Dr. Lydia here, and I saw that you had done some work with Project Zero as well. I didn't know if you had done any work on any of the books with Dr. Richard as well.
I haven't done work directly with him, but he is a major figure in the PZ space, and I attended one of his keynotes.
Okay, cool. I just saw that and I was like, I'm gonna see if you're actually in the books or not. So yeah, that's awesome. Very, very exciting. Yeah.
How about David Perkins?
Again, I didn't directly work with him, but I think he influenced a lot of the work at PZ, also influenced my work. And
so David Perkins wrote a book called Smart Schools. I used that book as the premise for building a website for building the online learning tools called the Smart Web back in 1997. I built basically a system for like Canvas here, based on his ideas, and had students build smart schools. When I was in grad school, there's a professor there named Dr. Robert Enright, Bob Enright, and he studied forgiveness, like he studied hope, and people laughed at him. Today, fast forward, I got my alumni magazine. He's been nominated for a Nobel Prize many times. He's not got a Nobel Prize, but he's authenticated the field of forgiveness, moving it out of a religious concept into the mainstream of psychology. And you might do the same for hope. You never know. So look up the name Bob Enright, Enright, and you might get inspired by his work and think about how your work on hope might progress those 5 stages already. You've already developed 5 phases or stages or aspects of it. So, and now she's going to present twice for 10 minutes. Then we're going to ask questions. So I've probably been asking too many questions. We need to get started here. So, Lydia, would you like to pick one of the 2 articles to emphasize first? Or let's do this. How many of you would like for her to talk about the Earth design paper first? Raise your hands. And how many would prefer the AI's paper? So the Earth design, raise your hands if you prefer that one. 1. Okay, we want the AI paper first. So if you could present your slides on the generative AI one, that'd be great.
Okay, we start with the AI one. Great. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Yes, we can. That's Hope and Change from Obama. Yes, we can.
Awesome. So I'm going to start with the AI work, and I can't see a timer from now. I'm sharing my screen, so please stop me, Kurt, after 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the article. So generative AI, we often hear things like generative AI really disrupted education, but what we really mean is really disrupting a product-focused education model. And what do I mean by product-focused? So, for example, right now in our education system, we really emphasize on having students writing a cogent essay, scoring high in SATs, or developing proficiency in a language. And these are the products of learning, or the proxies of that learning actually happened, but that's not learning itself. So as a result of that, with generative AI being able to produce these learning artifacts or proxies of learning, there's lots of concerns about plagiarism. So the question now is, if the goal of education is solely to produce these products, why would students not take a shortcut by using, a tool like ChatGPT? But in learning, the destination is actually the journey. It's a little bit counterintuitive. So what I mean is that, for example, learning to write or write that essay, the goal is not really to write that essay. It's actually developing the capacity to organize one's ideas, connect these ideas to others, analyze claim, synthesize insights, and fulfill our fundamental need to communicate with and learn from others. Similarly, learning a new language is not just being able to say, for example, can I order a coffee or converse in a language. It's more about taking on different cultural identity and embodying an alternative way of thinking and being in the world. And these things are the actual learning. So in the paper, Chris and I advocate for more process focus on learning. So this is not a new idea, and educators and researchers have been pushing this for decades. So learning, we think, is a transformative experience for humans. So it's not just a product creation, but in our education system, we often mistaken these products of learning as learning itself. So what do I mean by process focused learning? I'm going to give more examples later, but here just want to give one example. For example, there's the idea or the concept of a stealth assessment. So it is really interwave assessment with the learning process. So students are being assessed authentically throughout the learning process as they learn. So there's not really a product that they are looking for, but the learning and assessment is all happen simultaneously. So I know this class is about creating learning environments. So I'm going to focus on, what educators can do, what learning designers can do. And there are 4 ideas I would like to present. I'm not going to quickly go through them. And the first one we can do in the face of generative AI is really to demystify it, meaning to teach learners the nature of generative AI. So in the paper, Chris used 4 brilliant analogies to really break down these ideas to make it really accessible for learners. I'm not going to repeat it here. It's in the paper. So we need to create experiential learning opportunities for learners to experimental with these tools. For example, have them play with, ChatGPT. And there are also resources out there that's being created to teach students the workings of generative AI. I'm just highlighting 2 repertoire here. One is called RACE. That's, I think, it's hosted on MIT, and there's another one called Craft. It's by Stanford. So they host like a range of different resources for students of different ages.
Lydia, can you go back 3 slides?
Yeah.
There. Yeah. Could you explain? I do want you to go ahead because this is important in your paper. Could you explain a couple of these for us?
Sure.
I know it will take more time, but I think it's important.
Sure. Actually, hide these slides. Now I can just show them. I think I have to unhide them for them to show. Let me unhide. Okay. So one of the analogy is the digital parrot. So generative AI, or like one example is large language model. It does not have an understanding. What it does is actually predicting the next word. So it can generate a response that sounds plausible, but it has no understanding of what it's saying. So it's like a parrot that's just repeating things. So it is also, a large language model is also like a brain without a mind, meaning that because it's like a digital parrot, is just repeating what is being said and predicting the next word. It has no consciousness, no metacognition, no agency, no senses, no experiences, no ethics, no implicit knowledge. So it has no body to experience these things, and it has no friends, no culture. So it's very different from what a human is like, even though when we think of AI, there are lots of, the popular depiction is, I think I also hit that slide, is like, you know, a brain with a chip, or like a digitized human or a robot. But it's really far from being like a human. And then it's also like, Kurt, should I keep on going, or should I?
Just briefly, yeah.
Okay, really briefly. So it's also like a distorted mirror. It reflects back artifacts that it assimilates from the World Wide Web, the biases and misconceptions. So it's a distorted mirror of, you know, reflecting back of what it assimilates. And lastly, it's like, if human intelligence or human knowledge is the sunlight, a large language model is like the moonlight. It reflects the radiance of the sun. It learns from the sun, from our human knowledge and creativity. It reflects back to us both truthful insights and biased misinformation. So that's the 4 metaphors or analogies, and you can go back to the paper to review them.
I'm sure everyone has a friend or two who spits out knowledge, but they really don't understand what they're saying. They just happen to be right. You know.
Yes, exactly. It's basically that.
Yeah.
How much time do I have? 5 more minutes?
Yeah, at least to give us the important stuff, because you know, I want to entice them to go read it. So
great. And so this is just highlight of one of the you know, tools from the repertoire. It's called Element AI. So these are a series of free online courses about the fundamentals of AI and how to build AI systems. This is another one that's curated for middle schoolers, and it's called Daily. I'm not going to go into detail, and I think this one is developed by MIT. It also teaches students the workings of AI. And so, but in the classroom, it's not important just have children or students try these things. It's really important to unpack their learning and thinking via discussion. And Bo mentioned making thinking visible at the beginning of the class. This is the time to make student thinking visible. And as a teacher myself before, I'm always guilty of trying to jump into like the solutions I want them to like have, or accidentally funneling their idea to the predetermined direction I want them to go. But really the teachers need to take a step back and create a favorable conditions for students' collective interaction, and to help them to push their ideas forward rather than funneling them. And so how do we do that in the classroom? How can we lead a productive discussion? And that's something I find really difficult as a teacher. And so that's what my thesis was based upon. I don't have time to talk about my thesis, but I just want to introduce you to some tools that teachers can use right away to foster productive discussions. So one of the things is an SRF protocols. So these are protocols, like discussion protocols students can use in their small group to generate productive discussions. They have a lot of different protocols for different purposes. So this is just one of the examples.
What is NS? What is the acronym again stand for?
National School Reform Faculty.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And another one is like teachers can use to lead productive discussion is talk moves. So again, this is by Michael O'Connor. This is also available on the internet. I'm not gonna go too much into details. So basically these are sentence stems and teachers can use to prompt students to say more and think more deeply. Which
your boss now has built a bunch of them. They call this procedural facilitation and substantive facilitation. If the STEM related to that topic that you're addressing in the paper, then it's substantive facilitation. If the STEM is, or the question is generic in nature, then it's procedural. And that to me is a higher level type. And that's what my dissertation was on, procedural facilitators. STEMs, all these are ways to free up students' thinking and to get them, you know, outside their normal just just writing a 5-paragraph essay, getting to think about something substantive and coherence and persuasiveness and their assumptions and their biases and all that kind of stuff. So it's not just idea generation, but it's idea evaluation and coherence along the way. So it's both a generative process and an evaluative process here. I'm sorry, I cut you off there.
No, I need to go read your thesis now.
I'll send it to you.
Yes, please. Another way is if teachers want to do more of a systematic investigation of the way they use talk in their classroom, you can go to this website. It's called TSADA, stands for Toolkit for Systematic Educational Dialogue Analysis. So this toolkit is built for teachers to self-evaluate and self-audit their own classroom practice. It's kind of like a self-paced TD, if you like. So this has been translated now over to 10 languages. Actually, I just recently wrote a paper on this, interviewing the translator across the globe who've been working on this. So they've been taken up by many practitioners across the globe. If you're interested, feel free to look into it or contact me afterwards. I'm happy to talk more about this. And then the second idea is about focus on the process of learning rather than just the product, which I kind of spoke briefly about at the beginning. And how can we really do that in practice? So one way is to really encourage students to slow down. This is a bit counterproductive in a time that we're constantly trying to do more. And one of the I say people say advantage of generative AI is like, allow you to do more more quickly. But learning is a different process. It requires people to slow down and really pay attention to the complexity and relationships that are often overlooked. And one of ways to do this is via thinking routines. Again, I think Bo mentioned that the work at the beginning of the class, and then these are just 2 thinking routines I've picked that really encourage students to slow down. So feel free to go on the PZ website and look up the other thinking routines that you find suitable for your practice. Wow, let's make thinking visible. And then, so this is to really design assignments that create space for learners to showcase their work in progress. So not just the final product, but also the messy work in progress. So this work in progress can be verbal and non-verbal. People can just, students can just talk you through it, or it can be, their drawings or their bullet points and however they would like to present. And then it's important to provide this kind of multiple check-in points for students to reflect and to gather informal feedback. Speaking of feedback, there's another strategy called ladder of feedback. This is also developed by Project Zero. So feel free to go on the website and check this out. So what it does is it layers up your feedback that focus on different aspects. So it's not, just telling students what to do or give them really encouragement, but it all layers up and leading up to productive suggestions for students. And most importantly, apart from us giving them feedback, it's important for learners to develop the capacity to monitor their own learning, their own process of learning. So we need to position learners as active seekers and process of these feedback rather than, they're just passive recipients. And one thing is we can do to achieve that is really leverage the collective intelligence in the classroom. So we can teach students how to give each other feedback. So some strategies here, you can use a gallery walk or a fishbowl to model productive feedback. Another thing really to focus on the process of learning is to design group-worthy tasks. So group-worthy tasks are tasks that's worthy for a group to do rather than just a task that can be completed by individuals or divided among the members in the group, which actually usually happens. Students meet up at the beginning and they chop up the project to different pieces, and they come together in the end and put their slides, and that's the group work. But that's not group worthy task. So we need to present students genuine dilemmas and these authentic tasks where they have to share their lived experience, explore different beliefs and opinions, gently challenge each other, build consensus, and really rise above. That's a word from, you know, my current boss, Scarlett Malia and Berider, is really rise above their previous ideas to create new collective knowledge.
So go back a slide just briefly. So we have students working on final assignments that are group-worthy tasks. They're all in the midst of group-worthy tasks. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'll be reading them soon.
Great. I'm really losing track of time, but because I can't see time.
Let's give you a couple more minutes, then we'll go to Q&A on this. Yeah.
Great. And if something I didn't present today, they're in the paper. More motivation to go to read the paper. So another one to honor the process of learning is to see AI as a dialogue partner rather than a product producer. So instead of seeing generative AI as the one who knows it all or the one who knows the answer, we should look at it as a dialogue partner. We should feel we have the freedom to build on, critique, and question AI generated ideas to create new ideas. Again, we should rise above these existing ideas to generate new insights. And I don't have time for that. I'm just gonna skip. And
definitely go back to that. That's very important.
Oh, okay.
That's critical.
Everything's really critical here. So generative AI depends. The answer you provide depends on the prompts or the question that were asked. So one of the challenges surrounding that is actually if a learner has not yet developed enough prior knowledge or the language to articulate that problem, a response might not be helpful. So we educators, we can help learners to build these foundational knowledge and a roadmap to help them to navigate the terrain of learning.
There are tools like Bloom's taxonomy, but we had Paul Kim in week 2 or 3 of this class talk about SMILE, and we tried out SMILE in this class.
Great.
That's why I had to stop you there.
Yeah, and I don't need to say anything about Stanford SMILE. And
right.
And then so we can also leverage AI for feedback. So instead of asking AI for a product, we can give AI our product and ask them to give us feedback. Of course, you know, the feedback might or might not be useful, but this way, you know, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on this. And so in this way, AI is not really doing the thinking for the learners, but supporting us to think better. And the last point I would like to emphasize is really the tension between facing an empty canvas and building on AI-generated ideas. And previously, I've spoken a lot about, you know, we should build on AI-generated ideas. But here, sometimes maybe we want to face the empty canvas. We want to face that fear. Maybe we want to face that uncertainty, really to unleash whatever is inside us or to find, you know, inspirations elsewhere. So we need to develop this metacognitive skill to discern when, where, and how to use AI, rather than use it just like by default, use it all the time. And so in this way, we can become more mindful users and creators of AI rather than, you know, using it in a mindless way. And I don't think I have lots of time for the last 2 points. I will just briefly talk about the main ideas. So one of the challenges surrounding generative AI is plagiarism. And so there's, you know, discussion on previously on banning AI. And I think now it's starting to shift more towards embracing AI because we realize you can't really, you know, ban it. And it would actually, you know, it's not gonna be helpful for students. But I think it's important to remind ourselves that AI didn't invent plagiarism, it existed before that. And then we need to ask ourselves, why do learners plagiarize in their learning? So once I heard someone say nobody plagiarizes in their diary because plagiarism would defeat the purpose of writing a diary, which is to express yourself. and you're writing a diary not because you have to, but you want to. So we need to ask ourselves in our learning, are we really leveraging students' intrinsic motivation, or we are really using the extrinsic motivation, giving them grades and these things to keep them doing what we thought that they should do, and why do we learn what we learn? And but also intrinsic motivation is not a panacea. It does not prevent failure or frustration. So in fact, for any learning to take place, learning have to be at the edge of their competency. So failure and frustration inevitable is part of learning. And also we're not intrinsically motivated by everything. What motivates you might not motivates me. Some people find cleaning extrinsically motivating. Some people might need building extrinsic motivation structure to get these things done. So we need to see motivation not as something like learners have or they don't have, but rather see that as an ecosystem of motivation. And we need to support learners and have themselves to engineer an ecosystem motivation for themselves. And the last one point is about cultivate skill that AI cannot yet perform. So in the previous paper, Chris have categorized skills into two categories. One is called judgment, one's called reckoning. So our current curriculum and education really focused on reckoning skills. So these are calculative predictions and formulaic decision making. So in other words, like a cognitive recipe people can follow or to reach a certain conclusion. And then the other category of skills called judgment. And these are deliberative thought process that is flexible and contextual based on experiential knowledge, ethics, values, relationships, and culture. And AI is really good at reckoning skills, and it's proven itself in many tasks, but it struggles with judgment skills. As we mentioned earlier in the beginning of the talk about AI is a mindless brain. It does not have the experience and the bodies and the ethics that humans have. So it really struggles with human judgment skills. So instead of thinking about, how jobs going to be replaced by AI, we need to think about how we can augment our intelligence. And this Chris call it intelligence augmentation. So IA instead of AI. And one way we can really foster students this intelligence augmentation is by presenting them genuine, authentic, real-world problems that are ambiguous, complex, multidisciplinary without a one solution. Example of that is, for example, design a community-based solution for mitigation and adaptation of climate change. So in this example, learners can experiment with partnering with AI during problem solving and design. They can leverage AI's reckoning skills, ask AI to summarize the precipitation average temperature trend in their community over the past 50 years, and cross-check with meteorological data from various sources. At the same time, learner can exercise their judgment skill by incorporating their lived experience, their understanding of their local culture to design effective solutions that have local buy-in. And then, AI came out very recently. There's lack of regulation and understanding what it really means to partner with AI. So I think educator and learner can really contribute to this debate and discussion by documenting their experience with AI and examples of their human and AI partnerships. And that's the conclusion. So by harnessing the benefits of AI, while nurturing the unique ability of humans, we can really tackle the big challenges that we're facing. I think I'm definitely gone over time. So
we'll get to part 2 after some student questions, or audience questions, I should say. We have a couple alums of the program with us, at least 2 I see. So Bo, do we have questions on the Jamboard?
Yeah, I think we at least have one in there right now.
So let's start with
actually, we got 4.
Okay, we have 4 questions on the Jamboard. Raise your hand if you want to ask one off the Jamboard. Okay, Ed, you voted for the other talk though, Ed, but I'll let you go ahead.
I know, because I thought this topic would take more time.
And it did.
All right.
Yeah, my question was on generative AI, because as I'm doing my other classes, if you can't have a peer to a real person to talk to. Can you talk to AI in which it can encourage you and develop your learning abilities? Maybe not the end product, but to help you develop your skills so that you can do, solve any problem that you need to. And then, I think my other articles I was reading for my other course were talking about, being adaptive to the person itself, not the end product, but building their skills so that they can do all the tasks and that are required to accomplish them. So I work for a tech company, and we talk about ChatGPT all the time, and what we can do and what can't do with it. And processes are what we're looking for, not answers. So
Absolutely.
Lydia?
I think I think it's a more of a comment, right? It was a question.
Well, the question was, is AI at the level where it can become a peer, not where you have to put in input, but it can recognize you and then adapt to what you do?
I think, can you elaborate a little bit more on like recognize you and adapting to what you do? You mean like being maybe
So you've integrated with it so much that it becomes your personal AI, that it starts to know who you are because you keep asking questions, so it picks up your style, and then now understands which processes you do and do not know, and then starts feeding you information based on what you don't know.
I don't know, Lydia, have you seen 2001: A Space Odyssey? Yesterday, one of my colleagues sent me a little clip from it, and Hal's talking to Dave and going back and forth. He knew what Dave's reactions were going to be. The astronaut, the computer was, locking him out of the ship and basically, terminating his life. He knew him so well, he could figure out what his next moves are going to be. And Edward's getting at personalized, being able to, not just be there for information, but being personalization of that information for the learner, specific learner needs and adaptations.
Yes, I think this is a really good question, and thank you for elaborating on it. My immediate reaction is one is human metacognition. The other one is the risk of pigeonholing individuals. The first one is that we shouldn't let AI deprive us of doing the thinking of our own thinking or recognizing our own patterns of behaviors. I think that's a very dangerous thing, because that, as a result, that we can risk a pigeonholing individual. That we can already see that in Facebook, when Facebook use AI to adapt the content of what we see, what we use, and know us so well. They know exactly the kind of shoes I will like and put it on my front page. And that create an echo chamber around individual. They can't see themselves outside of that anymore. So I think there's always a danger of that. And I think we haven't really, I don't know, figure out how to do this to be really empowering for humans. I think right now, when it comes to AI, and I think there's a lot of excitement around, we can finally find a way to give every child a personal tutor that, based on Bloom's Two Sigma, this should really significantly improve students' grades and learning. But I think the story is more than that. Humans flourish not just by feeding the content they need to. They need to be challenged outside their comfort zone as well. So I think, my answer is that yes, we should have AI as a learning partner, but be careful to not let it take away our own agency and metacognition.
So I mean, it's great you mentioned like Facebook. What if Facebook AI was the antagonist all the time? So no matter what you like, it was always the opposite. So you'd get both perspectives.
Lydia, thanks for bringing us back to a topic on agency, which we discussed last week on Tuesday, maybe and Wednesday. Carol has a bunch of questions. Carol, you want to jump in with one of those?
One of the questions is, since AI is just predictive, the data it returns is not necessarily accurate, right?
Yes, it's not always accurate. And it also can hallucinate, meaning it can generate a seemingly plausible answer, but it is not correct.
So it would be dangerous to use data to solve problems. Like you said, we could use it as a like a helper in the example you mentioned for climate change, but that would be a little risky, wouldn't it? Since you can't trust the data.
I think like always cross-check. I think that's if we want to use AI, especially in any major decision-making process, we always need to cross-check.
I cross-check everything. Everybody gets mad at me because I'm always cross-checking. Yes.
That's really important.
Okay. And the second one, I was all excited about the tools we learned in this course, and there was a little webinar for faculty at the university here, where they were going to talk about AI. And then I said, oh, have you heard about this and that? And they were, yeah, but we're worried about IP, so we can't use any of these things. And are you familiar with like AI and privacy and what is the danger of it?
I don't claim to be an expert in it, but do you mean like AI, like the data's being used to train models like ChatGPT can already, you know, infringe upon people's creative work and, you know, copyrighted content? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's what the person told me. I think they are concerned about content produced by university faculty, so that's like belongs to the university, and then they are concerned that it's going to be used to train the AI. So do we not want to train the AI? I don't understand exactly why it's dangerous.
I think right now this is the gray area. I think there's some ongoing debate and discussion about this, you know. I guess if they are, for example, learning from copyrighted content or, you know, artists' creations, but without artists or these writers, I'm just using the you know, the creative profession as example, without their permission or giving them any compensation, these AI models are basically plagiarizing their work, and then, you know, and OpenAI is selling these models to people.
Okay.
And so, but these artists, firstly, they didn't have their permission. Secondly, they didn't get compensated for their work being used to train this data. So that's unethical. And so I think there are concerns around these areas. Also, I guess the quality of data that's being used, because, you know, they feed AI the internet and
Everything. Yes. Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
I know from a corporate perspective, the challenge is feeding data into it that belongs to customers. And then usually these companies that own the AI have a clause in there that once the data is entered, it's now theirs. So now you fed private data into another company, and now it's their data, and you can't get it back.
Yeah, they are very careful about not ever putting any personal information in any of these systems.
You can see that there's a number of areas which any of you could become an expert in, whether it's ethics of AI or intellectual property, you know, or plagiarism. I mean, all these topics you can build an expertise in just of that. When I started getting into online learning, people expected me to answer those questions, and I was an expert at online learning pedagogy, but they wanted me to answer on copyright, plagiarism, assessment, and quality. And I knew nothing about quality, copyright, plagiarism, and assessment, and I did not want to know anything about those. I wanted to be a pedagogy expert. In the old days, when you studied human learning, you became an expert at motivation, for instance, Maslow and Rogers and other motivation experts, but one small slice of learning. But we've gone to this digital space, and when you say you're an online learning expert, you know everything about learning, including, you know, forms of feedback. I mean, just everything. Like I said, plagiarism, quality, copyright, and assessment. This is also happening in the AI space. There's no one can be an expert at every aspect of AI. Number one, the copyright rules are changing on a daily basis. So I once was a copyright expert in online learning and gave talks on it. The next month, I knew nothing because the laws had changed. And so it's really hard, you know, pigeonholing or finding your sense of space within these places of online learning, open education, AI, and all this, because the questions are quite varied, and
Yes.
No one person knows all of this. Nobody. There's nobody on the planet knows all the questions that we would have as a class and could answer them. So we need to go to Yuhan.
Hi, Lydia. Thank you so much for coming to our session today. I really enjoy your presentation and your report. I love the metaphor you came out to kind of explain the nature of generative AI, and I also appreciate that you mentioned the importance of motivation and some of the practical tools you shared in the report. So my question is very general. I was just wondering, what kind of knowledge and skill or mindset are still considered as important or valuable in the era of generative AI. I know, so I'm from the Boston area as well. I work at Boston College, and we develop like resource guides for both faculty and students. Like what we developed 2 months ago is already outdated given the latest release of OpenAI, their information cut, some of the personalized nature of you can personalize your own chatbot. So I'm just wondering, I think you mentioned a couple things in the article. You mentioned, explicit knowledge versus implicit knowledge, and then maybe AI is good at teaching kids explicit, but whereas people are better at modeling or demonstrating the implicit. But I'm just wondering, again, like look at what's happening today or just even last week, things are already changed, right? So my question is really about now, like what's still considered as important when we think about the purpose, the goals of education. I thought about like I thought about like content knowledge, like whether content knowledge is still valuable, and then my immediate action was yes, because I was just wondering if you don't have any content knowledge or expertise in this field, like you cannot really curricularly evaluate the responses of what AI provided. But I'm just wondering, from your experience, your research, what kind of things you would consider as, the most important thing we should definitely, emphasize like when interacting the next generation.
This is the $1 million question. Yes, I think yesterday I just saw UN put forward a new framework on the critical skills in the age of AI. I'll find it and put in the chat. And so, yeah, I think this is really the right time for us to take a step back and say what is worth learning. And I think we, as educators, we should always ask ourselves what is worth learning. Just because it's in the curriculum, it might not be worth learning, and also for who, And I don't have a framework yet of, what is worth learning in the age of AI. But I think the notion of intelligence augmentation could be a useful way for us to think about it. So what is AI good at, and what is us good at, and how can we work together to create new knowledge and tackle these really big problems that our world facing, like climate change? So I think if we start from there, then we might be able to work our answer backwards. Sorry, I don't have a very satisfying answer at the moment.
No, that's totally okay. I want to ask the question just because I think, again, like that's a question we always need to consider as an educator. But I think the framework you provide, again, could be like an overall overarching guiding framework for us to approach this question. So thank you.
So it looks like Emily Verga has a comment for us. Before she reads the comment, Bo's son, Duke, is sitting by. He wants to go to MIT someday, or Oxford, or Harvard, and he has a question for you. So, Duke, would you like to jump in?
Yes, give me a sec. It keeps flipping.
It's okay. Give me a second.
Okay.
There you go.
I have a couple. My first one is, what if a teacher assigns a group-worthy task, but one person in the group doesn't listen? Would they get the same level of information as the other people in the group?
I love how students ask the real questions. Yes, exactly. That's so important, the pragmatics of, all these approaches. If one person doesn't listen or doesn't collaborate, and is that going to affect group work? Is that the question?
Yeah.
I think yes, absolutely. And so my immediate reaction as an educator is that how can we work together to help that student to be on board and not leave that person behind, or saying, now I'm gonna assess you all individually because you listen well, you're gonna get a really good mark, and that person didn't listen, so he's left out in the group, so 0 for that person. So how can we be more of a community of learners together, rather than almost like be competitor of one another in the classroom who gets a better grade? So I think that goes a little bit to Marlene's work on knowledge building. How do we collectively as a community care for one another and collectively advance our thinking as a group, rather than, following rules? Of course, it's important, and there's always difficulty. It's not easy to work in a group. That's what I'm trying to say. And but I think it's workable, and I think we right now in our classroom, we don't have enough time to do this. We always have so much content to learn. We have no time, to build a community. We have no time to slow down. We have no time to say, well, this group dynamic didn't work out. Let's sit down as a group and what didn't work. We don't have time for this. So I think in the future, our classroom should have more time for this and address your question.
You can ask your last one. Do number 2, and that'll be our last one there.
Okay. Is a question I had, is AI an effective way to teach students? Would that be a good idea or not?
For AI to teach students? That's a good question. There's lots of thinking about, is AI going to replace teachers? Do we still need teachers? I think
like that.
My answer, sorry?
I don't mean it like that. I know that's probably not going to happen. But if there were like some programs teachers used with AI instead of like using books or stuff to study, would that be an effective teaching method?
Yes, absolutely. I think AI should be teachers and students' partner, and you're right, it's not going to replace teachers, because when students reflect on an influential experience they had as when they were in school, they often talk about the relationships, and not what the teacher taught them, but the kind of person the teacher was and how the teacher treated them. So these relationships are really important. But of course, we should, but teachers are also really busy. And I said earlier, teachers don't have time to do all this meaningful work. So if we can have AI to support teachers with their teaching, yes, absolutely. But we need to also recognize the limitations of AI, to ask yourself, what can AI really teach? So we shouldn't equate learning as, stuff or content. And so what can AI be most effectively, what AI is really good at doing? What can AI really teach? And so I think we need to ask ourselves that.
Can you tell Dr. Lydia, thank you?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Those are really great, insightful questions.
Thank you.
We appreciated that. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm muted again. So, that language education, learning languages online, is definitely going to be enhanced by AI, because it's going to be a supplemental agent. It's going to be the resource that reviews things, that gives you feedback, that gives you alternatives, that gives you suggestions. That's an additional part of the repertoire of the teacher, and it can be something you can offline and do it at home and work with an AI bot and so forth to improve vocabulary, spelling, or grammar, or much more important skills, persuasive writing and persuasive speaking and such, but it's not going to replace the teacher's role. It's going to enhance it and maybe speed up the learning of language. Charan is with us, who's editing 2 books on AI. Charan, you have a comment there on just what I said?
Yeah, originally I had a question, but I think it's not worth mentioning.
Go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead. No, please.
I mean, yeah. So I work in the writing field actually, and I hear a lot of because I work a lot in research on AI. I see a lot of potentials, but because my work with a lot of humanities disciplines faculty, they do have serious concerns in terms of how AI is influencing their field a lot and how they assess students. For instance, some professors will say if you use AI and like the student, because the language itself is part of the assessment, because language or the words that students are using, the diction, is part of students' identities and is a representation of their thoughts. So they really want to see that integration of the forms of ideas and the idea itself. So that really causes a lot of concerns, because when they see AI is assisting students writing, then they are thinking that it's not an authentic way of representing the students' intellectual inputs. So I was wondering about your thoughts on that specific group of faculty's concern.
Before you answer, I'll mention that Charan is an alum of our program, a COVID alum, about 3 years ago, and she's at Colby College in Maine at present time, and on my research team on AI, and we're publishing stuff. Lydia.
Amazing. I think that's a really good question, and it's definitely worth mentioning. I think, if we are teaching students, for example, like the syntax here, and having students use AI to generate the correct syntax is probably not the right way to go. But I guess is, how can we use AI if it were to be used? How can AI help the student learn the syntax, not to produce the correct syntax? But also, how do we help them to learn the syntax? I think we need to be clear on AI's role in learning versus AI's role in working. Like, if you already know how to write an email in a respectful, professional manner, you didn't need to learn that. Maybe you just want to have this email done in 2 minutes, and you tell AI how to write email. Does it represent your idea correctly? You quickly edit it. Okay, this is done. And that's using AI to speed up your work, versus I don't know how to write an email. I'm going to ask AI to write an email on behalf of me. I think we shouldn't mix up those two tasks. And I definitely understand the concerns of the instructors. So I think what might be helpful is for the instructor to take a step back to say, well, in this case, for AI to produce a syntax here is not the most productive way, and what other ways to use AI if AI should be used in this scenario.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Emily Ver, can you just read your comment? We'll move on to someone else, but tell us where you're working at, Emily.
Sure. I'm at a 7 through 12 school district in southern New Jersey, and one of my summer to-do lists was to put out some guidance and helpful tips and a continuum of ways that you would use AI in your classroom to benefit the learning process. I didn't get it done this summer, but I'm now working in collaboration with some of my instructional technology coaches to put out some guidance for teachers. I think I'm glad it didn't get done this summer, because I think like you echoed, Dr. Bonk, and like we heard, like, things are changing so quickly. It's hard to produce something that's valuable guidance that's worth your time to put into it. But I'm thankful for all of the work that's coming out from so many different areas that we can pull on and draw from to provide resources. So it's just a struggle point for us is getting something in the hands of our teachers that's meaningful and timely before it changes again. And I don't think we're alone in that, but it's just acknowledging that. So Yuhan, I really appreciated your question. And I do have a quick question. It is related to hope. I'm just curious if any of your research or work that you've done related to hope, if you found any connections to efficacy or collective efficacy, whether it be self-efficacy or just efficacy in general.
I was going to ask her that because it relates to Bandura's, collective efficacy, in his later stages of his life, he built that into his model. And so I thought, well, yeah, it sounds like efficacy when you get to hope, So is there collective hope?
Right.
For the hope work, we just starting recruiting participants. So I don't have an update that yet, but once I have findings, I should be invited back here to talk about that work. But I don't know, the answer is I don't know, but that's something I will keep in mind. And another comment is, I guess, a comment back to your comment is, I think, it is hard for educators to navigate this constantly evolving terrain. And I think there's, there's constantly a lot of things being produced out there giving teacher advice. Teacher can use this to design a quiz. Teacher can use this to write a lesson plan. And I think these all helpful to offload some of the work of teachers. And but I think teachers, when they use ChatGPT or other generative AI, I think they need to ask themselves, am I just replicating the old things or conventional practice, or I'm actually innovating here? I think one danger of AI is we can easily use AI to scale up a conventional outdated practice. So I think if teacher can constantly play the role of evaluator here, I think that it might be helpful for teachers.
I'll just mention that Albert Bandura was on the board of trustees for the School of Ed. And when I introduced him once to the faculty and students to give a talk, I mentioned him as retired. And after his talk, he pulled me aside. He said, I'm not retired. And the next year he came and passed out his new book, which had a chapter on collective efficacy. That's why I brought that up. And he signed a copy, I still have. He passed away last year, the year before, unfortunately, the last most famous psychologist in America of the early founders. And Jill has like 5 questions. Before we go to Jill and her 5 questions, we can only ask one, Jill. Belle, who's on the team with Sharon and I, Belle, did you want to jump in and ask Lydia, or at least meet Lydia? Belle got her master's degree with me, and yeah, go ahead.
Give me 1 second. I do have a comment. I wanted to argue a little bit of the idea, the metaphor of parrots, because that is before ChatGPT, I agree with that. But after ChatGPT, since it has the ability that can generalize beyond their training data to understand and respond to new prompts in meaningful ways, and it do have some sort of problem-solving abilities, and it has contextual adaptations. So when you if it can adjust their outputs in real time based on the additional context or feedback. So I think they're more than a parrots. So this is my argument. It's not a critique, it's just my thought. And I also wanted to share a story that as from a student perspective, because I do use ChatGPT to do my assignments. I assume that a lot of people here are from faculty perspective. And I was questioning myself that whether I'm learning from this process, and really like your idea of slow down the process. And so one time when we interview a YouTuber, so on our AI project, and I asked her, when do you think that, how do you know that learning happened while you're using ChatGPT? And she says, when it has when the output of ChatGPT click with your thought. And this aha moment indicate that
this is what I'm looking for. So that means like learning happened. So my question is, how do you know that learning happened while your students use ChatGPT, and how do you use it, and how do you learn from it?
Yes, I love pushbacks, and I think that's when a good discussion comes from. We need to gently challenge one another. I understand where you come from. I think I read a paper, something like ChatGPT beyond like a digital parrot, or is much better than a digital parrot. So based on my current understanding, I think ChatGPT, the GPT-based large language models, the fundamentals, it's the fundamental mechanism is still word prediction. I wouldn't say it has understanding like a human understanding. I think it appears understanding what you're saying, but it is the mechanism behind it is still predicting the next word. So I think that's the workings of generative AI. I think there's no analogy that's perfect. That's why it's analogy. And so I definitely understand your pushback on this. So it appears better than the digital parrot. But I would say that the fundamentals behind it is still parroting. So I don't know if that's a fair response to your question, but there's so much things constantly evolving. There's so much learning to do. So I think this just encourages us to learn more and figure out more.
Lydia, the second part was how do you use it, I guess, and what's right,
yeah.
Bill?
Yeah, the second part of that's another really good question. Like, how do you know learning actually happened? We usually use like assessment to say, well, if you know this answer to this question, then you've learned. We know that's an imperfect representation of learning. And I think that's a really assessment question. I think learning how can happen. It could be a subjective experience, like a aha moment, be like, oh yeah, that really clicked with me. I got it. I think that's one aspect of learning happened. But I think a holistic assessment will assess the other aspect beyond a subjective experience. It's almost like self-report in research. We know self-report is very flawed, and what people say is quite often different from what people do. So I think we need to have another perspective on the learning experience itself. However, I think having the learner that's having the subject feeling of aha is so important. That's almost missed in our current assessment system. Is almost assessment always come external assessments. Like, oh, I got 90% on this, I learned. But you didn't learn. And then, so I think we need both. Yeah.
I'm Bill and Lydia, I'm glad you had a chance to meet, and maybe you can correspond more on via email and other ways, maybe in WeChat or something like that. So let's get you connected. Bill's written 4 papers with my team this summer, past summer. We got 2 published and 2 are in review. So it's been fun working with Charan and Bell, and Xiaojing Ko's with us as well. I saw Xiaojing here too. Our entire team is here. So Jill, I know you have a number of questions. Does anyone else want to jump in before Jill, and they have a pressing question they've been dying to ask? I know there's a number of people in here. Christy's been smiling the whole time, and I thought for sure she has something to at least comment on. Christy.
I actually did put a question on the Jamboard, did not put my name on it, but I was thinking as we were talking about basically asking the questions and shaping your question, altering your question so that you get a better response. I kept on thinking about the learner presence that Peter Shea was talking about when we met with him. Like, how is that helping the student actually process the information? I'm not sure if you're familiar with what he shared, but I thought it was fascinating because their study was how the students interact with each other kind of behind the scenes, through email and through not the obvious, kind of chat cafe where the students can interact on the learning management system, but instead working together. And I was thinking, as, kind of like, I'm trying to remember who opened our conversation. I don't see his picture to help me anymore. James or
Edwin.
Edwin. Yeah. And I was thinking of when he was talking, I'm like, wow, that's kind of the same idea, that you are actually using the Chat GPT to help you learn the process as opposed to, unfortunately, reading or taking in the information. But in the same token, if you're asking questions like we learned with the SMILE program, you're actually thinking about it and you're processing it just in a different way. So I was really just, thinking about how this all worked together.
Sorry, do you mind? I think I lost track of
I had lots of stuff going on.
Authors and perspective. I think it's great that that bring different perspective together. And but do you mind like summarize your?
Sure. I was just wondering aloud or in my busy head as all of this is going on, hence the smiling through it, is basically how this could kind of replicate the idea of learner presence as the student is processing the information, metacognition, and like asking different questions, more sophisticated questions, maybe more accurate questions to get what they're actually looking for. And so I'll be 100% honest, I was anti-AI at the beginning of this semester, and I've had an about change, and I've really started to see the value that it can be used for good, because I will tell you, I have had lots of papers that are like, there was no thinking involved. They put in the prompt and they just dropped it in the Dropbox. So I know that happens, but I'm trying to also see the other side of what I need to do as an educator to set them up so that they have to think critically and apply to themselves as opposed to just using that. So, like I said, I'm really interested in how this might be considered learner presence or the metacognition and beneficial as opposed to something just negative.
I think that's a brilliant idea. Evaluating or the questions, the interaction between the student and AI. As they interact with the AI, they gather new information. Maybe they cross-checking. I learned how to do sentiment analysis by going back and forth between Stack Overflow and ChatGPT, because I didn't have enough background knowledge to articulate my questions sufficiently. So ChatGPT answer didn't make sense to me. So I went back and forth. I gather some new information, understanding. I go back, and so as I don't have the history of chat, but I'm sure that my questions have evolved over time, and my question become more targeted, precise. So it actually helped me to solve the problem I was facing. So I think that's a great way to honor the process of learning. As you were talking, I was thinking, maybe a general rule of thumb with this is if you are doing the heavy lifting and and spending those mental energy is probably a good sign. That's the process of learning. But if we're like brain numb, just click, 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 that's probably not learning.
Copy, submit.
Yeah. So anything that's heavy lifting when you're interacting with the ChatGPT, I think learning is happening. If it's mindless or copy paste, I doubt learning is happening.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've made kind of a decision a little bit. I think for tonight, I think we're not going to have you do part 2 on Earth-centered design. I think what we're going to do is have you share your slides with everybody. And then have you come back next year, and if you're willing, and present on that next year. If people want her, I mean, I'd keep her here, but I don't want to abuse people's time. I do want to get. We have more questions on generative AI. I want to do 2 or 3 more, and then call it an end for tonight. And then you and I can chat about Earth-centered design, maybe after everyone's gone just a bit, and I can create an email to everyone with your slides, and we can share them that way. Bo, do you think that sounds good?
Yeah, I think that works. Edward is definitely shaking his head, and he knew this was going to happen.
So maybe we'll call in, and then everyone will go. And Edward, you stick around, and whoever's interested in Earth Center design, I'll have Lydia just talk about it for 5 or 10 minutes. We won't record it. We'll record it next year. I think that's what we'll do. I'm not positive yet, but I know for sure a couple more people have questions. So I want to get your question on generative AI. Next week's guest is going to talk about AI assessment tool. David Gibson's our last guest next week at 7 o'clock. He's really internationally well known for gaming research, for online learning, for AI. David Gibson knows a lot about a lot of stuff. So don't miss that one. And we'll be back to AI again. Jill, would you like to ask one of your many questions?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Baum. Actually, this is my idea, which can back out Yun Han and Bella's idea about the value of subject knowledge and how teachers or educators assess if learners really learn. Because I think besides the concept collaborating with AI, judging knowledge and help shaping learners' capability of asking questions, I think teachers still need to provide as many chances as possible for learners to really test the knowledge, to test if this kind of constructed knowledge, either with peers or with AI, is really workable or is really applicable. Yeah. And another idea is that probably it's time for teachers instead of learners to learn how to, develop the questions or problem that do not really have direct answers, that could facilitate the human AI collaboration, because most of the teachers I know are really good at asking the questions with direct answers. Probably it's time for us to resharpen our capability to ask, to probably give some of the questions that collaborate or facilitate the students' abilities of working with AI. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a really good question. And I think to answer this question, I think we have to think about, like, what is the nature of knowledge? What are we trying to teach students? Are we, like, I think most of the time we operate under the metaphor of the mind as a container, and then like the knowledge is the correct facts that, need to be deposited in the container. But I think now going back to Marlene's work, I don't think she sees knowledge as a static in nature. She sees knowledge as progressive, knowledge as improvable ideas. But I think, as a teacher myself, as before, I think we learn from a very young age, no, knowledge is the correct answer at the back of your exercise book. That is knowledge. And I think to move beyond that, we really need to move beyond the mind as container metaphor and knowledge is static in nature. And I know that a lot of practitioners, it's hard for practitioners, definitely. I think it's easy for researchers and, to speak like in a very high level about these things, but go back to the classroom, it's a different business. And, as the policies are evolving, as curriculum evolving and pedagogy evolving, and what do teachers teach tomorrow? There's so much confusion around this. So I absolutely understand your question, and I think there is value in content knowledge, but I think there is value in understanding the fundamentals and workings of an area. For example, I'm so curious about, I never learned programming as an undergrad. So now I'm taking a class on how to program. I want to understand how computers think. I think there is value in these areas, how in understand to obtain content knowledge. But the problem right now is we are stuffing content knowledge into students' mind as a container for the sake of it. And there is no value almost for a student to orchestrate this content knowledge together to do something. I don't think I've ever met a student that doesn't want to do anything in the world. Even like it's Minecraft, I want to create something. I want to, I want to do something cool. I want to be good at PE. They always want to do something. And I think we need to allow students to see the values in these content knowledge. I think when I was a student, I didn't want to learn computer science because that's so intimidating. I don't think I have, I didn't feel comfortable learning that. And I say, oh, I'll definitely fail. But that already, like, that's not, it's education, the way these subjects could be presented, putting a barrier on me to learn something. And I think our job is to really break down this barrier for students and help them to think they can learn anything they want to, and they can use these things they learn to solve the problems they care about. And so I'm not against content knowledge. And I don't think, well, we're going to teach skills, no content. Yes, skills are important, but we need, if I have the skills, I think the important skills we can teach students is the skills that they can learn anytime in their life if they want to. I don't think it's ever too late to learn anything. Maybe that's the most valuable thing we can learn teach students. Apart from that, yes, we need to help students see the value in this content. I forgot your second question. I got too carried away.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I just want to add that there is an increasing trend of research on the so-called complex ill-structured problem. Yeah, I think that's the reason why it's gaining popularity right now.
Right. Wicked problems, they call that. So as Lydia said, anyone can learn anything from anyone else at any time. That's a direct quote out of my book, The World is Open. If you find that interesting, there's more quotes in the book, pick it up. It's 12 years old now, maybe older than that. So we've kind of almost run out of time. We have time for a question, maybe, or two at the most. Does anyone have a dying or pressing question to ask Lydia? What I decide, I've changed my mind on some things. What we're going to do is we're going to stop the recording at some point here. And then who's ever left, we'll have a chat with Lydia. I'll record the second part. It won't be much. You probably, but I'll make a recording so you can go ahead and leave. Whoever wants to leave, Ed can stay with me, and Lydia and whoever else wants to stay. Does anyone else have a final comment or question? Rachel usually does. Lena usually does. Haven't heard from either one.
I did have a question, but it's more on the pragmatic side. So how can educators find out how an LLM was trained so they can more or make a wiser decision about which tool to use? ChatGPT is definitely one of my least favorites because of their terms of service. And I wouldn't recommend any educator use it for anything except for experimentation. I wouldn't use it seriously.
So what do you recommend? What do you use?
I use different ones for different things because they seem to produce quite different results. I really like Claude AI, and I like Chat PDF for.
I love Chat PDF
for reading. Right,
it's a great tool. Yeah. Does anyone else have a AI tool they want to nominate before we close tonight?
PDF Gear.
What's that?
PDF Gear.
Okay. And Rachel, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
I really liked the Contact Nord sites. I've been experimenting with those quite a bit just to see the difference between the tutor and the teaching assistant.
So Dr. Ostin's talk a few weeks ago, and that's been recorded. You can watch that again if you missed that one. Anyone else have a comment or a nomination? If not, and Claude, has anyone else used Claude besides Rachel? Claude 1, there's Claude 2 now. it's more logical, apparently. They have more logic structures built within that system. And Bo's shaking his head. So Bo, what do you think?
I've really appreciated Claude for my professional purposes. I like the fact that you can input up to like 5 different PDF documents into it and create like a cross-reference or an analysis of the different documents that are in there. It also has a much larger capacity for the prompts that you put into it than ChatGPT does as well.
Rachel, you mean ChatGPT 3.5 or 4.0 or?
Yeah, so I read the terms of service for 3.5 and just the ownership, like we talked about, a classmate mentioned that anything you enter into it, they, claim ownership of, and the hallucinations that are pretty easy to create or force the chatbot to kind of move into.
Okay. I'm going to say, let's thank Lydia for tonight. Round of applause for her. And I appreciate the comments. Yeah, round of applause. Yeah. And so I'm going to stop it a second here. This is week 13, part 1, or maybe the whole part. I'm not positive yet. So it's ending about right. Again, thank you, Lydia.